Hey everyone, John Lorden here. Welcome to another episode of Itchy Mysteries. Thank you so much for joining me today. There's been a lot of talk. I've looked into several cases and have now seen a few documentaries about the internet and the social media age and how that can be used as a tool for people to do bad things to other people. Today's film really wants to be an example of that, but quite honestly, I struggle a little bit with it, and we're going to talk about why. Before we get started, I have to give a very big thank you to Tanya for suggesting that I check out Murder Games, The Life and Death of Breck Bednar. This is a production of BBC Three. This was made back in 2016, premiered in January of 2016. Let's go ahead and get the synopsis out. Docudrama telling the story of the 14-year-old schoolboy from Surrey who was groomed online by 18-year-old Lewis Danes via online video games and lured to his death. I like that they call it docudrama because it's mostly a documentary, except there is a considerable amount of dramatic recreations done that are merged together with the interviews. What's really cool about this is you can always tell when it's a dramatic recreation because they have this kind of filter on the video, almost trying to make it look like it's a video game. It's kind of muting out some of the detail, and it's turning everything to more solid colors. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it at first, but by the time I got to the end, I understood that it was kind of necessary for how they were treating this topic and to kind of be respectful to this topic. So it gives you a very clear indicator of, okay, I'm watching dramatic recreation, and then all of a sudden you'll go to an interview with a family member or someone, and you'll know right off the bat, okay, now I'm kind of, back in the real world on this case. The angle of it having to do with online video games, of course, really grabbed my attention, really intrigued me. And it's there's this interesting way that this documentary unfolds where you almost feel like you're going through a story. It's pretty well written, and outside of that, there are some really good performances coming out of the two actors that are recreating Breck and Lewis. And I have to really call out Sam Clement for his portrayal of Lewis. There is some 999 phone call that you'll hear from the real Lewis. And it seems to me that Sam did a really good job of listening to that source material. Maybe they gave him some other source material as well, and really adopting kind of the vocal patterns. And he just comes across as really kind of spooky and disturbed. And it really works well. It's not typical that I watch these types of documentaries and I have to call out someone's performances and the dramatic recreations. Here, I feel like it's absolutely necessary. I think this is worth a watch just so you can see Sam's work. He does a really, really good job with this. Outside of that, you have just a story that absolutely tugs at the heart. You've got a group of young schoolboys, 14 to 15 years old. They're friends. They know each other in the real world. They start interacting with this person online, Lewis. He's given them access to a private server of his that's really fast, and they're all playing games together. There's a lot to associate with in this. I think many of us out here have played online games with strangers, and you have no idea who's at the other end there. But what's interesting for me in this particular story is the things that the parents were afraid about. Yes, absolutely. Some of them came true, but some of them certainly didn't. I think the main fear was that Lewis was going to be, some 40-year-old guy somewhere that was kind of perving on these schoolboys. It doesn't quite play out like that. And in a way, that does something to the narrative of this, not be scared, but be cautious of online relationships. Because quite honestly, this relationship could have happened if this was another schoolmate of theirs. There is another film that I reviewed just a couple months ago called Kill Me If You Can. Kind of falls into the same vein in terms of the message it's trying to get across about be careful of online communications, but it might actually strike the point a bit better. What's clear in Murder Games is the parents, I think, are looking for an answer to how they could have avoided this, and they have zoned in on the online communication. I'm not sure that that is honestly the best solution for trying to help what could have happened here. When I was a young man, there was frequently times where I would start becoming friends with someone and they had patterns or habits or all kinds of other stuff that I recognized I did not want in my life. And luckily, I was strong enough to end those relationships, sometimes very abruptly, but to try to be very selective of the people, the circles that I associated with, and the types of people that I let into my life. I don't know that every 14-year-old understands that dynamic. And I think that there is a more important conversation to be had as a result of issues like happened in this film. For example, you'll learn about Lewis's backstory, and quite honestly, he has the same backstory that we hear about frequently when we talk about shootings that occur at schools here in the U.S. So I do think that there is a bigger discussion that has to happen about how do we not let children fall through the cracks? How do we not let them be abused by systems and then kicked out to become something that they might have not necessarily become under different circumstances? But back to Murder Games, really a heart-tugging story. You have great performances going on in it. You have good information that is being presented in a pretty artistic way that I really appreciated. There's a lot that works really well for this for me. And in terms of a mystery, the whole time, you learn very early on that, obviously this is going to be about the death of Breck. I mean, it's literally in the title, but there is the mystery of how does it occur? And then of course, what happens after that? How do investigators look into this? What type of outcome is there in the prosecution around all this? That is really not a big part of this story. Most of this 1-hour film is trying to highlight the dynamic of the online communication that is happening between Breck and Lewis. And it sounds challenging. I would, if I was picked to direct something like this, I'd be wondering too, how am I going to make these scenes interesting? I mean, you basically got, a couple teenagers talking to each other into headsets or online. They did an excellent job in making this communication really interesting, picking some very interesting shots, of course, weaving in a little bit of video game footage here or there. Bringing on the friends of Breck really brings a huge dose of humanity to this story. And there's even this kind of cool aspect where they integrate real footage of Breck's friends playing online and having a good time, and they incorporate that with the fictional characters. So it kind of blends, or it takes that line between the reality and the stuff that is dramatic recreation, and it blurs that line pretty harsh in a couple of sections in particular, which I think is really cool and just once again drives the humanity square into this story. I think many of you out there would really appreciate checking this out. The only thing I caution you against is, like I said, the narrative that, we have to kind of watch our kids. We can't just let them be on the internet. It extends past that. Quite honestly, this situation could have happened in so many other ways that had nothing to do with online gaming. There is more to it than I think this film allows for. That's the one shortcoming. Other than that, I think it's really, really well done, a really good production, and many of you are going to enjoy it. Right now, it rates a 6.9 at IMDb. I'd crank that up. I'd definitely give it an 8 for me. There's little that I could see that could make it better outside of maybe changing that narrative that they're trying to stick to about the internet. But in terms of production values, excellent production values, good performances from the few actors that are in it, but really touching information from the family members that are featured in it, from the friends that are featured in it. It is the humanity that I look for in these stories when we're looking into these tragic cases. This film has it in very large doses. So I was able to watch it on Amazon.com as a Prime member for no additional price. You could just go there and click on it, at least for Amazon here in the US. Even if I had to pay to watch something like this, I would easily, rent it for $4 or $5, something along those lines. It's I do think it's worth your time. I do think it's going to make you think about some things, particularly if you have children of your own, or if you don't, maybe it'll help you recall some situations where you went through things like this. Maybe you'll wind up sharing those stories with someone. There's things to learn in here is basically what I'm trying to say. So if you're up for that, check out Murder Games, The Life and Death of Breck Bednar. Thank you so much for joining me on this itchy mystery. I appreciate each and every one of you out there that supports the channel. Let me just stop and just say thank you, guys. I can't do this without you. Take care. I hope you're having a wonderful week, and come back tomorrow for a brain scratch. I'll be here. I hope you are too. Take care.